Hi, everyone. We're back for another episode. Thank you for being with me. This is Sam Collins, your coding and billing expert for the American Acupuncture Council, specifically the network, your compliance, billing, coding, and most importantly, reimbursement expert. And we're going to talk a little bit about reimbursements today in the sense of let's talk about the acupuncture scope of practice and more specifically therapies. Many of you are doing therapies, and I'm not saying you have to do therapies, but many of you do. And for the most part, they are reimbursable. We want to make sure when they are reimbursed that we don't have any issues with that it wasn't documented properly or some of these things some of you run into when you get denials because they look at your notes and go, wait, it wasn't there. I want to make sure you know the quick and easy of how to do it, not complicated, and whether or not who may provide them. As you're familiar with physical therapists, chiropractors can use assistance, but can an acupuncturist? So let's go to the slides. Let's talk about what is the scope of practice for acupuncture. So let's look at the acupuncture scope of practice and look at what's going on for us, what's allowed, who may perform it, and all those things I mentioned. Now, generically, the scope of practice is one that it generally states this type of issue here. And I've just given an example. It means the stimulation of certain points or points on the surface of the body by the insertion of needles. So in other words, inserting needles, that's acupuncture. But beyond the acupuncture, of course, what else can you do for therapy? So you'll see here it talks about generically perform the use of Asian massage, acupressure, breathing techniques, exercise, heat, cold, magnets, nutrition, diet, and herbs. In other words, much more than just inserting needles. Now, this specifically is the California rule. Let's look at another one here. Let's take a look at Massachusetts, because sometimes these rules are somewhat vague or very specific. I'm going to say, please know your state regulations, because some states have more generous allowance, some have less. So here's Massachusetts. It talks about adjunctive therapy. So that means things beyond the acupuncture. But notice what it says. Shall include, but not be limited to. And whenever you say it shall include, it means these things, but of course more. And I would say pretty much everything you learn or are taught in a standard acupuncture curriculum. So this is going to include lots of things in therapies, but also things like what they state here for Massachusetts: nutritional counseling, herbology, recommendation of breathing techniques and exercises, and lifestyle, behavioral, supportive, and educational, and even stress counseling. I want to focus in on, well, are those things billable? That gives a pretty broad notion of, could they do like massage? Well, sure, that would be something that would be not limited to. Then we've got someplace like Florida, which really lays out a ton of things. And I kind of bolded it here. Notice Florida says manual stimulation, acutopment, even goes so far to talk about massage, acupressure, shiatsu, even tuina, electric stim, laser, and then even goes into the details of what type of oriental massage you may have. Notice here it talks about acupressure, ama, anmo, gua sha, hara, nui sha, reiki, and so forth. Again, given the details. So again, you can see this is a very broad scope. They can do many, many things. However, let's take a look at New York. Some states are more restrictive. It says the profession of acupuncture is treating by means of mechanical, thermal, or electrical stimulation affected by the insertions of needles or by the application of heat, pressure, or stimulation at a point or combination of points on the surface of the body. Now you notice here the much more restriction. It doesn't give adjunctive therapies. It specifically says heat, pressure, and electric stim. It doesn't talk about exercise, massage, or manual therapy. So you want to be a little bit more careful. Now, as restricted, if you will, as New York can be, New Jersey, across the border, it's going to have the most generous. I'm just pointing out, please know what you can provide within your scope. I'm going to take the generic standpoint of, for the most part, acupuncturists can perform standard physical medicine services, physical therapy. And so that's going to be this listing here. If you've ever attended a seminar with me, you've seen this type of list where I give you the common CPT codes. You'll notice that we include acupuncture, of course. That's something you can do. By nature, can an acupuncturist also do needling? Oh, of course, if you'd like to. Never the same time, but you could. I would recommend acupuncture, of course. But it includes also doing modalities, such as heat or electric stim, but also constant attendance ones. What about electric stim that's manual? How about even laser? Notice there's two different codes for laser. And then, of course, we have the other things like exercise, massage, manual therapy, even therapeutic activities. And a lot of these, sometimes people are going, well, what do these all mean? What are they? And so I like to think of it not so much as trying to reinvent and trying to teach you something new, but let's talk about the things that are commonly done in an acupuncture practice. What are common therapies? Of course, heat. I would say majority of acupuncturists I've ever met use some form of heat, whether it's infrared, TDP lamp. I've seen hot stones, hot packs, but heat almost always is seen within scope everywhere. But would also include things like electric stim. Now, I'm not talking electric stim of the acupuncture. I'm talking electric stim generically, like on the surface, like a TENS unit or the little pads people apply. That's not uncommon. But it also includes all types of body work, meaning massage or manual therapy or just soft tissue manipulation. I kind of put it generically. This could include tuina, even gua sha to an extent. We have to look at where do those fit. But it also includes, and this is something that I think acupuncturists often forget, the active therapies like exercise. These three codes are in fact covered under the VA program, which are going to be just standard exercise, therapeutic activities, more functional, and then even balance or coordination training with neuromuscular reeducation. I'm going to say these are probably the 4 or 5 things that are pretty common. Now, on that, I would say also cupping and moxa. Outside of the VA, though, we don't find commonly cupping and moxa will be paid, though I'm not saying not to do it, not to bill the patient and or the insurance. What I can only guarantee is it's payment under the VA. But nonetheless, these are the common ones. Now, you might say, well, Sam, I'm doing a few more. That's okay. If it's within scope, I'm all in. But I want to talk about the common things to make sure, are we documenting it properly? So let's talk modalities, things that you can apply to a patient, but you don't have to be there. Like you can turn on an infrared heat lamp or a TDP lamp, let the patient relax, let that heat do its work, but you don't have to stand there while they're doing it. So we say those are unattended, which means there's no time. So you either do it or you don't, and you bill accordingly. But we still have to make sure how we're documenting. And the same would apply. What if you're doing a modality that is timed? So what does documentation need? Infrared heat, it's as simple as saying you applied infrared heat to the lumbar spine or whatever the body region. Now you'll notice here I put 15 minutes. Is 15 minutes required? No, because it's a modality that's unattended. I'm putting 15 minutes so that I know in my notes how much did I do last time. What I'm pointing out though is that the time that you do it is not going to change how much you can bill. It's 1 unit only. Nonetheless, the key factor here is indicating where I had a provider, and this is with United and a few others that got denied for infrared heat because when they reviewed their notes, it didn't indicate where. Now, the provider said, well, Sam, I was diagnosing the patient's low back, so obviously the heat had to go to the low back. I don't think that's an illogical explanation, but it doesn't fly. Always make sure to simply tell me what type of heat, where'd you do it? In addition, what if you are doing electric stim? Well, tell me what type. Are you doing 2 pads, 4 pads? What's the intensity? In fact, the easiest way to think of this should be documented in a way that any person reading it would know how to apply it. If I told someone, put a hot lamp on their low back for 15 minutes, would you be able to repeat that? I don't think too much trouble. Or if I said electric stim in this manner. So think of documenting as just a way of highlighting what you've done, not by checking a box. Checking a box that says I did heat would not be sufficient because where did I do it? What type of heat and so forth. And that even gets more confusing when you look at some of the hands-on stuff like massage versus manual therapy. What is the difference? Well, they're very similar. Generally, manual therapy is more focal. I'm going to say probably a deep tissue, if you will, that's focused on a trigger point is probably going to fit more manual therapy, whereas the more generic stroking and relaxation would be massage. The key factor is document what you're doing with either one to differentiate between the two. So tell me what type of massage you're doing or trigger point or myofascial release. Lots of ways of describing it. Tell me how much time you spent because this is a time code. Now you can put start and stop times. You can say I started at 11, ended at 11:35, or you can say I did 35 minutes. Either way is acceptable, but it is absolutely required that you put how much time. Kind of like acupuncture, you have to have the time element. So simply document what you're doing in a way that when someone looks at it, they can see what was done. And then, of course, always have a little bit of why did I do it? What was my purpose? What was the outcome or the goals? Give a little bit of how the patient felt after the visit. Did it accomplish what you're looking for? Even exercise. Acupuncturists, if you think of probably the most ancient form, if you will, probably stems back to acupuncture. When you think of Qigong, Tai Chi, and those types, the enhancement of the physical culture of the body. Now, that doesn't mean you're turning your office into Gold's Gym, but what if you are doing some exercises where you're putting the patient through a series of stretches or other types of exercise, yoga or otherwise? Absolutely. Just tell me what you're doing, how many sets, how many reps, or whatever, the amount of time that you're spending. The key factor is when you're documenting anything that's time, do remember the 8-minute rule. This is the same that's true for, of course, acupuncture. Remember, 1 unit can be as little as 8 minutes. That's perfectly fine for 1 unit. But to get to 2 units, it has to equal 23. So let's say, by example, you did 10 minutes face-to-face for acupuncture and 10 minutes of exercise. Would that be acceptable to bill 2 units, meaning 1 of each? The answer is actually no. Because if you think of it, if I did 10 minutes and 10 minutes, what's the total number of minutes? Only 20. Therefore, that's not enough for 2 units. Notice 2 units takes 23. So it's 15, if you will, plus 8 to the next. So you got to make sure it adds up. Now, by contrast, if you did 11 minutes of acupuncture face-to-face and then 12 minutes of exercise, that actually would count. It's that specific. Tell me the time. Generally, when you write the time down and you really put from and to, you're going to find you probably have spent more time than you realized. If you just simply wrote you spent 15 minutes, you may or may not have spent 15 minutes, often spent more. Keep in mind, look here on what is acceptable for documenting time though. Don't make this hard. There's 2 ways to do it. Tell me how many minutes right here, or just tell me from and to, from 9:30 to 9:45. I'm okay with either, but get it in there. What's unacceptable, notice, are the generic things like just putting down that I did a unit, or telling me that I did an average time. I saw someone said, I spent 25 to 35 minutes. Huh? Either you spent 25 or some number up to 35, but not between that. So just be specific. And then please don't fall to where you just say, I did 2 sets or 2 units. It's got to be time. That's not very hard at all. In fact, I think if we were taught that initially in school, probably be a lot easier for many of you. But just think along those ways. Tell me how much time you spent. I invariably find when I help to audit and deal with these types of issues, when I talk to the doctor, it turns out they often spend a lot more time than they've documented simply because they try to average. It's kind of like what I call, if you tell someone, oh yeah, it takes like 5 minutes to get there. Does it ever actually take 5 minutes? Maybe not. That's kind of the idea. Well, once you get on the freeway, tell me how much real time it takes. And then let's follow with, can I use an assistant to perform these? Now, as an acupuncturist, can you do these? Clearly part of scope, part of the services. In fact, the VA encourages it. But may you use an assistant? Well, the answer is no. There's no laws that create acupuncture assistants in the way that can do therapies under your supervision, meaning that you bill for it. If you are billing for it, you have to provide it. Now, by chance, if you had another acupuncturist working for you that did it, then I would say yes, but not someone that's not licensed under you, if you will. So keep in mind, we're not there yet. I'm hearing rumors of some states, and I'm hearing maybe Arizona is going to be the first one. But as of now, you would need to do all the services that you bill for. You cannot have a staff person. Now, I know there's some states that allow people to pull needles, things of that nature. But again, keep in mind as far as the therapy, no assistance. Now, I'm hoping we get a change there. I mean, obviously, chiropractors use them. Physical therapists use them. I would think acupuncture should also. But until we have the law, I'm going to say no. Let's not make this hard. The main thing you do is acupuncture, but there may be therapies that are adjunctive. Make sure they're in your scope of practice. Make sure they're documented, and you're doggone right, you're going to bill for it. That is money you deserve and should be paid. If you're not billing for it, if someone's willing to pay you an extra 50, but you don't bill for it, they're not going to pay it. That's what I do for you, is to make sure that we can help you get paid. That's why we do these programs. It's what we're doing for you. If you want some real day-to-day help, someone that can really make sure you understand what fees should I have? How do I document it properly? Can you help me off this, Sam? Make sure it's okay. My job is to always make sure that you honestly just have a better business, meaning one that is compliant, but one that also makes sure that you're getting maximum reimbursement. Give us a look at our website. Otherwise, I'm going to say to all of you, thanks for being with me. I'll see you next time. And until then, continue to take good care of your patients. See you next time.